My son texted me, "Don't come to my wedding. My wife doesn't want to see you." I quietly closed his bank accounts that very night. The next day, the two of them stood at my doorstep, unaware of what I had done. I'm so grateful that you're here with me, listening to my story. Please like this video, stay with me till the very end, and tell me which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached, and hear your own thoughts too. I was sitting in my kitchen, the morning sun spilling over the counters, when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number at first, and I hesitated before picking it up. Then I saw the message preview. My heart froze. "Don't come to my wedding. My wife doesn't want to see you. Stay away." My son Daniel. My little boy who used to run into my arms when he was scared, now typing words that cut through me like ice. I stared at the message, my hands trembling slightly as I set the coffee mug down. I could feel the pulse in my neck, a sharp reminder that my body was still capable of reacting to shock, even at 62. I blinked, trying to process. I wanted to respond. I wanted to call him, beg him to explain. But then the rational part of me, the part that had spent months watching, analyzing, and documenting everything about this woman, said, "Stop. Don't reply yet." I sat back in my chair, staring out the window at the small garden I had tended for years. The roses were blooming early this year, as though mocking me with their careless beauty. My mind replayed every conversation, every smile Daniel had given me in recent weeks, every interaction with Vanessa. He was different now. He laughed less, avoided my eyes, and nodded more than he spoke. And now, this message, Vanessa. She had found the perfect way to isolate him, to make herself the center of his world. A cold fury rose in me, but I forced it down. Panic wouldn't help. Anger wouldn't help. I needed clarity. I opened my laptop and started going through the notes Rachel Torres had sent me, the detailed documentation of every suspicious transaction, every unusual withdrawal from Daniel's accounts. My hands moved almost mechanically, scrolling through spreadsheets and bank statements. She had been systematic, careful, almost surgical in her manipulation. The more I read, the more the pattern emerged. Credit cards opened in Daniel's name, bills transferred, payments disguised as joint wedding expenses. My chest tightened. She was using him, using his good nature, his love, his trust to fund her lifestyle, and he had no idea. I leaned back, closing my eyes, trying to remember the boy who once played hide and seek in this very living room, who once told me I was his hero. He didn't know yet. He didn't see the strings she had wrapped around him. But I would show him, and I would do it safely. I started drafting a plan in my mind. I couldn't confront Vanessa directly, not now, not without exposing Daniel to further manipulation. He had to see the truth himself. That morning, I called Rachel. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, her voice steady, professional, yet warm, "I've compiled everything. I think it's time Daniel sees it clearly." I told her about the text. "It's worse than I imagined," she replied. "This is the final push. He's being isolated and controlled. He needs proof, and we have it." I felt a small spark of hope. The same spark that had kept me going through weeks of sleepless nights, hidden tears, and tense conversations. Hours passed as I prepared. I reviewed the financial records again, making sure every detail was crystal clear. I printed a copy for myself, highlighted key transfers, and cross-referenced them with Vanessa's known debts. Each line, each amount, was a thread of truth that could unravel her manipulation. I thought about Daniel. What would he feel when he saw it? Betrayal, shock, maybe anger, but finally clarity. And maybe, just maybe, relief that someone had finally been watching out for him. I made a pot of tea, poured it into my favorite china cup, and let it cool. My hands were steady now, focused. This wasn't just about stopping Vanessa. It was about reclaiming my son's life. By late afternoon, I received another text from Daniel. "Mom, why now? Why are you interfering?" My chest tightened again, but I stayed calm. I knew this question would come. I typed a careful reply. "I'm not interfering. I'm protecting you. You deserve to know the truth before you make any irreversible decisions." No more, no less. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to inflame the situation. I needed him to trust the evidence, not my words. That night, I set my phone on silent, reviewed Rachel's notes one last time, and went to bed with a heart full of hope and fear tangled together. Tomorrow, Daniel would see the truth. Tomorrow, he might finally understand. And tomorrow, I silently promised myself, I would do everything to save him from the person who had ensnared him so completely. The next morning, I woke at 5:30 a.m., before the house was alive with light or sound. I dressed carefully in a navy suit, the one Daniel had always said made me look unmistakably serious, and poured myself a cup of coffee, though I barely touched it. My mind was already racing through the day ahead. The meeting with Rachel, the documents, Daniel's reaction, and the inevitable confrontation with reality. I knew I had to be calm, rational, and utterly controlled. Panic would only make him defensive. Doubt would only give Vanessa another foothold. My son needed clarity, and clarity required preparation. By 7:30, I was reviewing the financial statements again. Every withdrawal, every suspicious transfer, every unusual expense highlighted in bright yellow, staring back at me like a warning sign. $2,500 here, $5,000 there, all flowing into accounts labeled vaguely as VC personal or miscellaneous. And the timing, every single transfer coinciding with her rent, her credit card bills, her lifestyle expenses. It was a pattern and it was undeniable. She was feeding herself at Daniel's expense, while he thought he was being generous, being loving, being supportive. My hands shook slightly as I arranged the papers in chronological order, preparing them for the moment he would finally see. This was the armor of truth. I left the house at 8:15, driving slowly through quiet streets, my mind replaying every interaction Daniel had had with Vanessa in the past months. The late night calls, the sudden requests for money, the subtle gaslighting, making him feel guilty for questioning her, framing her needs as love, and his hesitation as doubt. I remembered the night he came home unusually late, avoiding my questions about dinner. His face was tense, forced into a polite smile. And then the small but unmistakable hints. She had told him not to trust me, not to question her motives. The isolation was complete. My heart clenched and I forced myself to breathe. Patience and evidence would win this battle, not confrontation. By 9:45, I arrived near the downtown coffee shop where Daniel had agreed to meet Rachel. I parked discreetly 2 blocks away, my eyes scanning the street, noting potential escape routes, exits, and the timing of pedestrians. I didn't enter. I wouldn't. I would let him approach the truth himself. Rachel arrived precisely at 10 o'clock a.m., carrying a folder with the compiled evidence. I could see her hands moving methodically, pointing to items in the folder, explaining transfers and timelines. And then I saw Daniel. His face, pale and strained, betrayed the exhaustion of sleepless nights. Confusion first, then recognition, then that heartbreaking dawning of betrayal. From across the street, I watched him pull the folder closer, eyes scanning numbers and names, connecting dots faster than I thought possible. His lips trembled, his hands shook. He put his head in his hands. 40 minutes passed, each one dragging like an eternity. I saw him scroll through something on his phone, showing Rachel, who nodded grimly. I knew, without being told, that he was realizing the depth of her manipulation. She hadn't just lied about small things, she had orchestrated months of deceit, feeding off his trust and his heart. And now the truth was catching up to her. At 10:40, his phone rang. Even from my vantage point, I saw him stiffen. He answered, listened, and then his entire posture changed. The color drained from his face. He whispered something to Rachel and bolted from the coffee shop. I started my car and followed at a careful distance, my heart hammering. He drove straight to his apartment, parked, and disappeared inside. 10 minutes later, he emerged with suitcases and a backpack, hands shaking so violently that he dropped a bag on the sidewalk. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. Vanessa just called. She's screaming. He's figured it out. Stay close. I followed him at a distance as he drove to my house. I couldn't help but feel a surge of protective relief. My son, finally awake to reality, finally free from the grip of someone who had used love as a weapon. By the time I reached my driveway, he was sitting on the front steps, head in hands, surrounded by his belongings. His shoulders shook as if the weight of months of deception had been physically imposed on him. I parked, approached slowly, and crouched beside him. Mom, he whispered, voice breaking. I'm so sorry, I didn't see it, I was blind. I took his hand gently. SHH, it's okay. You see it now, and that's what matters. She manipulated you. She lied. She's not your fault. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. The first step was taken. He was starting to reclaim himself. Daniel looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed, voice barely a whisper. She told me I couldn't trust anyone but her, that you were trying to control me, that I should choose her over you. I squeezed his hand, feeling the tension in his fingers, the unspoken guilt, the years of trust he had been taught to doubt. Daniel, listen, I said softly. You were being controlled, yes. But this isn't your fault. People like Vanessa, they don't just manipulate your heart, they manipulate your mind. And you saw it now. That's the first step to freedom. He leaned back against the porch railing, shoulders slumping. I thought I was loving her. I thought I was doing the right thing. His voice broke, shaking. I felt a lump in my throat, remembering the nights he had cried over her arguments, the long texts he sent at 2 a.m., the constant worry he carried to make her happy. He had been carrying her burdens, not realizing he was the one being burdened. I brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. You were loving her the only way you knew, but now you see the truth. Love isn't control, Daniel. Love doesn't demand secrecy, lies, or manipulation. It frees you. She wanted power over you, not partnership. He nodded slowly, tears streaming again. I want to cancel it, all of it. His voice trembled. But what if she comes after me? What if she tries to ruin me? I feel exposed, Mom. I feel stupid. I wrapped my arm around him. Daniel, she already tried to ruin you emotionally and financially. But now you have proof. You're not alone. You have Rachel, you have me, and we'll make sure this is contained. She can't touch you anymore. We moved inside, sat at the kitchen table, and I brewed some tea. Steam curled upward, the warmth a small comfort against the storm of emotions. I pulled out my laptop, opened the folders Rachel had emailed bank statements, screenshots, timelines, and emails. Look at this, I said, sliding the laptop toward him. Everything she's done, all the transfers, the debts, the manipulations, they're all documented. You were never imagining it. He leaned in, eyes scanning numbers and dates, and I could see the realization solidify, like bricks forming a wall in his mind. She was lying all this time, he whispered, a bitter laugh escaping. Every word she said to me, it was all calculated? I nodded. Yes. Every word, she wanted control. She wanted your finances, your trust, your life structured around her needs. That's not love, Daniel. That's exploitation, and now you're free to choose what real love looks like. Minutes passed in silence, only broken by the occasional sip of tea. Then his phone buzzed. I glanced at it, unknown number. Likely Vanessa trying another tactic. He ignored it. Mom, he said finally, looking at me with raw vulnerability. I should have listened to you months ago. I'm so sorry I doubted you. I thought you were being unreasonable, overprotective. I shook my head, smiling softly. Daniel, you were trying to trust your judgment. And that's what I want you to keep doing. Your judgment, now informed by truth, is what will protect you going forward. No apologies needed. The only thing that matters is that you know the truth now. His shoulders finally relaxed. He slumped back in the chair, exhausted but lighter than I had seen him in months. So, what do we do now? He asked, voice quiet, uncertain. I took a deep breath. We cancel the wedding immediately, we inform the venue, we block her. And we begin the process of protecting you financially, legally, and emotionally. You deserve a life without manipulation, Daniel. That starts today. He nodded, finally meeting my eyes with a mix of gratitude and relief. Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me, even when I pushed you away. I reached out, cupped his face gently. I never gave up, Daniel. Because love doesn't give up on the people it cares for, no matter how old they are. And now, you're reclaiming your life. That's the first victory. By 11:30 a.m., we had drafted emails to the venue, Rachel prepared a summary for legal action, and I documented every step in meticulous detail. Daniel was exhausted, but clarity shone through his eyes. He knew the fight wasn't over. Vanessa would try to claw back, but he was no longer blind. The armor of truth was on him now, and together, we would face whatever came next. For the first time in months, Daniel laughed softly, a sound I hadn't heard since the day he got engaged. I feel lighter, he admitted. Like I can breathe again. And I knew, right then, that no amount of manipulation, deceit, or lies could ever take that away from him. He had woken up and he was finally free. By midday, Daniel was sitting quietly on the couch, shoulders heavy but eyes clear. Rachel had stayed for a while, offering advice and moral support, but left to handle her own commitments. It was just Daniel and me now, the silence of the house punctuated only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. I could see the storm in his mind, memories of the past months replaying in rapid succession. The nights of worry, the arguments, the subtle pressures to spend, to move, to comply. Vanessa's words had been like chains, invisible but unrelenting. And now those chains were broken. I brewed more tea, handing him a warm mug. Drink this slowly, I said. You need to keep your energy. We've got a lot to do. He nodded, wrapping his hands around the cup, the warmth seeping into his fingers. Mom, I don't even know where to start, he admitted. Everything feels tainted. I can't trust my own decisions anymore. How do I even begin to rebuild? I sat beside him, placing a hand on his knee. One step at a time, Daniel. First, safety, blocking her, securing your finances. Second, truth, the documentation Rachel prepared. Third, healing. Therapy, support, time to process what she did to you. And finally, freedom, living your life without fear. He let out a shaky laugh. It feels like I've been living someone else's life. I nodded. You have been in a sense, but now it's yours again. Every choice, every decision, every step, you take it for yourself. And no one, not even Vanessa, can take that away. He took a deep breath, eyes scanning the walls of the home he had grown up in, the familiar pictures, the comfort of childhood memories. I don't even know how to explain this to anyone else. I feel stupid, gullible. I ignored so many signs. I shook my head firmly. You weren't stupid, Daniel. You were loving, that's the difference. Loving someone doesn't make you blind, it makes you human. The fault lies with her, not you, and now you have clarity. The phone buzzed again, unknown number. Daniel ignored it, but I could see the tension spike, a reminder that Vanessa wouldn't give up quietly. Mom, he whispered, she's not going to stop, is she? I shook my head. No. People who manipulate and exploit don't quit easily. But this time, you're prepared, you have proof, you have allies, you're not alone. And most importantly, you're awake now. By mid afternoon, we began the process of securing his accounts. Passwords were changed, accounts frozen where necessary, and credit alerts set up. I watched him regain a sense of control as he typed, clicked, and verified. Every small victory brought a flicker of relief to his eyes. Rachel's investigation had been thorough, and with my guidance, Daniel felt empowered in a way he hadn't in months. Vanessa had held the illusion of control, but it was crumbling with each document, each verified fact. I can't believe I didn't see it sooner, Daniel said quietly, rubbing his forehead. She was so convincing. Everything felt normal, even right until I really looked. I reached out, cupping his face gently. Daniel, that's exactly why you needed to see it clearly. You've learned something invaluable here. Trust your instincts. Question manipulations. And remember, you're never alone when someone genuinely loves you. Evening approached, the sun casting long golden streaks across the living room. Daniel leaned back on the couch, finally allowing himself to exhale. I feel exhausted, but also free, he admitted. I smiled, feeling a wave of relief and pride. That's the first taste of freedom. It's not easy, but it's worth it. And tomorrow, we start the next chapter, planning your life without fear, without lies, without manipulation. He nodded, eyes glistening. Mom, I don't know how I can ever repay you for everything. I shook my head gently. You don't need to repay me, Daniel. This isn't about payment, it's about love. Unconditional, fierce, unyielding love. You'll repay it by living your life fully, wisely, and joyfully. That's all I ever wanted. As night fell, we sat together quietly, the weight of the day giving way to a cautious sense of peace. The fight wasn't over. Vanessa would continue to try, and the wedding was still technically on the schedule, but Daniel had reclaimed his power. For the first time in months, he felt like himself again. And that was everything. Sunday morning arrived with a stillness that felt almost surreal. The air was crisp, and light filtered softly through the blinds, casting long shadows across the living room. Daniel was awake early, moving quietly, methodical. His suitcases from yesterday were neatly stacked in the corner, ready to be unpacked when the time felt right. But this morning, he wasn't preparing to leave. He was preparing to face the consequences of truth. I could hear the low hum of the coffee maker and the occasional shuffle of papers as he reviewed the documents Rachel had compiled. Mom, he said softly, his voice steady but tinged with nervous energy. I want to make sure everything is ready. If she tries anything today, I want to be fully protected. No surprises? I nodded. Good, that's exactly how it should be. Preparation is power and you have it now, trust it. He glanced at me, eyes serious. I don't know if I should call the venue myself or wait for the authorities. I placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Let them handle the legal side. You focus on your life, your safety, your clarity. You don't need to confront her alone. That's what we've been building toward: proof, support, and security. Around 9:30 am, I heard Rachel's knock at the door. She entered, her folder in hand, her presence calm but purposeful. Morning, she said, giving Daniel a nod. Everything's in order. I've double-checked all documents, transactions, and dates. If she calls, you follow my instructions exactly. No deviation. Daniel nodded, taking a deep breath. The tension was palpable, the gravity of the day weighing on us. He moved to the living room window and looked out at the quiet street, his reflection in the glass showing a man both weary and resolute. By 10 o'clock am, the first signs of action appeared. Unknown numbers began lighting up Daniel's phone, desperate texts, attempts to manipulate. He ignored them. Rachel monitored and documented everything meticulously. She's panicking, Rachel said quietly. These are classic manipulation tactics: fear, urgency, guilt, ignore them. Stick to the plan. Daniel's fingers clenched the edge of the counter. It's hard, he admitted, hard not to respond. I walked up behind him, placing my hands on his shoulders. I know. But remember, her power over you only existed because she was allowed access. That access is gone. Every time you don't respond, you take back control. At 11 o'clock a.m., we received a call from the venue. The wedding coordinator's voice was tight but professional. Mrs. Patterson, Daniel, we've had reports. We'll hold off on final arrangements until we hear from you. Rachel and I exchanged a glance. Daniel nodded. Thank you. That's all we need to know for now. We'll update you when necessary. The coordinator hung up, leaving a quiet but strategic gap of control. We were operating from a position of strength, not desperation. Noon approached, and with it, the inevitable Vanessa's fury. Her calls came incessantly, each one more frenzied, each message a crescendo of manipulation. Threats, pleas, accusations, they all poured in, but Daniel did not react. Rachel documented everything, ensuring that law enforcement would have a clear timeline of harassment, coercion, and fraud. She's losing it, Rachel observed, almost with relief. This is when people slip up, reveal something critical. Be patient, the trap will reveal itself. Finally, around 1:15 p.m., we received the confirmation the authorities were ready. Detective Chen had arrived at the office to review the compiled evidence and prepare the immediate actions. Daniel's eyes widened slightly, realizing that within a few hours, the situation would be legally sealed. The fear and anxiety he had carried for months now felt manageable, replaced with a sense of justice in motion. I held his hand, silently transmitting reassurance. You're not alone. You never were, I said softly. At 1:45 p.m., Daniel's phone rang, Vanessa's number flashing. He stared at it, fingers hovering over the screen. Rachel gave a subtle nod. He answered calmly, his voice measured but firm. Vanessa, I know everything. The wedding is off. You will not contact me again. The authorities are aware. Any further harassment will be met with legal action. Her voice faltered, then pitched to panic. Daniel, I can explain? He cut her off. There is nothing to explain. Goodbye. The line clicked dead. Daniel exhaled deeply, the weight of months beginning to lift. By 2:30 p.m., the wedding was officially canceled. Vanessa had no recourse, and Daniel's actions were protected and documented. Rachel and I helped him sort through the last few administrative details, securing accounts, filing formal reports, and ensuring that Vanessa could not regain access. Slowly, the realization dawned on Daniel: he was free. The chains of manipulation had been broken, and the path ahead was his to define. The day after the canceled wedding felt strangely quiet. The world outside moved on, oblivious to the storm that had just passed in our lives. Daniel stayed in his old bedroom, sitting at the desk he'd had as a teenager, his hands tracing the edge of the polished wood. He was silent for long stretches, occasionally glancing at the folder Rachel had left on the nightstand, filled with documents, bank statements, and detailed timelines of Vanessa's manipulations. Mom, he said at last, voice low, almost hesitant, I feel numb, relief but also guilt. I should have seen it sooner. I should have. I interrupted gently, placing my hand over his. Daniel, stop. There's no should have. You were in love, blind to deception. That's human. What matters is that you see the truth now and you're acting on it. He nodded, tears glimmering at the corners of his eyes. Mid-morning, Rachel returned, bringing more clarity and a structured plan for the next steps. We're consolidating everything, she explained, spreading documents across the desk. Police reports, bank statements, witness accounts. Your case is airtight. Vanessa has no chance of slipping through legal cracks. You've regained control, Daniel. That's what matters. Daniel studied the papers, his fingers moving deliberately over the lines, numbers, and dates. I feel like a fool, he whispered. I trusted her, I defended her. I shook my head, refusing to let him spiral. You weren't foolish, you were human. And now human with clarity, human with power. The past is over, the future is yours to build. By early afternoon, word came that Detective Chen was ready to review the evidence in person. Daniel's nerves spiked. Do I have to see her face? He asked quietly, a shadow of fear lingering. I shook my head. No, you'll never see her again. The law will handle her. You don't need to relive it. Today is about closure in your life, not confrontation with her. Rachel prepared him mentally, guiding him through the process of testimony and verification. Every step was deliberate, ensuring he understood his rights, his protections, and the absolute fact that he had done nothing wrong. At 3 o'clock p.m., a police officer arrived to collect physical copies of all evidence, officially opening the case for charges. Vanessa's tactics had left an unmistakable trail. Identity theft, wire fraud, financial exploitation, each claim was documented, time-stamped, and verifiable. Daniel watched silently, the gravity of her exposure sinking in. "She won't get away with this," he murmured. I squeezed his hand. "No, she won't, and that's why you stayed firm. That's why you trusted your instincts, even when it was hard." Late afternoon brought another wave of relief. Daniel called his workplace to inform them of the situation and to take personal leave for the week. His colleagues expressed concern but were supportive, understanding that this had been more than a personal crisis. It had been a manipulative financial entanglement. "Take the time you need," one coworker said warmly. "We've got your back. Focus on yourself." For the first time in months, Daniel felt a measure of normalcy, a sense that life might resume in a version that included honesty and security rather than deceit and anxiety. Evening settled softly. I suggested we take a walk through the neighborhood, something familiar to remind him of grounding routines. Daniel agreed, and together we strolled slowly, passing the small cafes, the community park where he had played as a child, and the quiet streets lined with blooming winter flowers. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon in gold and rose. "Mom," Daniel said, voice reflective, "I realize how much I've missed this, the peace, the simplicity. How could I have let her take so much from me without noticing?" I paused, choosing words carefully. "You didn't let her take it. You lived life as best you could. Now you reclaim it. That's strength, not failure." As we returned home, Daniel's phone buzzed relentlessly with blocked numbers attempting to reach him. Rachel had prepared for this, and we ignored each one. "Every attempt she makes now," I explained, "only proves the web she wove. Ignoring it is the best defense. No reaction, no access, no control." Daniel exhaled a deep, cleansing breath. He looked at me with gratitude and something like awe. "I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you and Rachel." I smiled, feeling a profound sense of purpose. "You never were alone. Remember that, and you never will be." That night, Daniel went to bed early, exhausted but at peace for the first time in months. I sat in the living room, reflecting on the journey, the heartbreak, the manipulation, the fear, the strategies, the victories. Every choice, every refusal to back down, every moment of vigilance had led us here. The path had been painful, but the outcome, Daniel's safety, his autonomy, and the exposure of Vanessa's deceit, made every difficult step worth it. I whispered softly to the empty room, "We did it. Justice isn't just served. It's earned," and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope. The following morning, Daniel awoke earlier than usual. The weight of yesterday's revelations lingered, but there was a new energy in his movements, a sense of clarity, of resolve. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the sunlight spilling across the floorboards, thinking about what had almost been lost and what had been reclaimed. "Mom," he said softly, "I want to start making changes. I want to rebuild my life, but the idea of facing the world feels overwhelming." I reached out, touching his shoulder, steadying him. "Start small, one step at a time. You've already survived the biggest storm. Everything else is a gentle breeze compared to this." Rachel arrived mid-morning with coffee and a notebook filled with organized evidence. "We need to prepare a timeline of her activity," she said. "Not just for the police, but for Daniel, so he sees the entire picture. It helps close the chapters in your mind." Daniel nodded, running his hands over the papers. Each line, each date, each documented transfer painted a story that was painfully clear now. Vanessa had carefully manipulated him, isolating him from family, controlling finances, and creating a facade of love while siphoning thousands from his accounts. He exhaled a shuddering breath, and I wrapped my arms around him. "It wasn't your fault. You were being controlled by someone with experience in deceit. The blame lies with her alone." By afternoon, we had a plan. Gerald, Daniel's attorney, had arranged for a legal hold on all her potential access to his accounts. This meant that any attempt by Vanessa to withdraw, transfer, or manipulate finances would be instantly blocked. It was a small but powerful reassurance, a reminder that control was no longer hers, and that Daniel had regained his autonomy. Rachel helped him draft emails documenting her manipulations, the evidence we had, and the timeline of events. Each line he wrote strengthened him, a subtle reclaiming of authority over a life she had tried to hijack. At 5 o'clock p.m., we received the first formal response from Vanessa. Her email was aggressive, accusing Daniel of theft, deception, and betrayal. "She's desperate," I murmured. "Desperation is dangerous, but it also means she's running out of options." Daniel's hands trembled as he read, but Rachel guided him through each sentence, helping him understand the difference between threat and reality. Ignore her, let the law respond, not you. You don't need to engage. Slowly, he nodded, the tension easing from his shoulders. That evening, Daniel suggested a quiet dinner on the porch. We set a small table, candles flickering, and shared a simple meal. The quiet was almost sacred, a buffer against the chaos that had dominated weeks of his life. Mom, he said, I never realized how much I needed this. The peace, the normalcy. I took it for granted. I smiled, touched his hand. Sometimes life forces us into storms to remind us of what really matters. You're seeing it now. You're alive, safe, and in control. Night fell, and Daniel retired early again. I sat in the living room with a journal, reflecting. The emotional toll of the last months was immense: fear, grief, betrayal, helplessness. Yet there was also triumph, love, and an unshakable bond. We had navigated manipulation, documented fraud, protected him, and preserved the integrity of his life. Justice was no longer a distant hope. It was tangible, near. I allowed myself a moment of quiet pride, not just for myself, but for Daniel. The next morning brought news. The police were ready to move forward with charges. Detective Chen called personally, her voice firm and encouraging. We have sufficient evidence for identity theft, wire fraud, and financial exploitation. Vanessa Chen will be arrested and charged. Your documentation and cooperation made this possible. Daniel exhaled, the tension in his chest loosening. It's over? He asked. It's over, I confirmed. Relief washed over him like sunlight, warming the shadows of fear that had lingered too long. Later that day, Daniel requested a private walk through the local park, wanting to clear his mind. We strolled along familiar paths, past benches and flower beds he had once helped plant as a teenager. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and earth. I feel like I've been blindfolded for months, he said quietly. Now I see everything and it's shocking. I nodded. Manipulators are skilled, Daniel, but the truth always has a way of surfacing. Today you've seen it. And now you get to choose what comes next. He smiled faintly, the weight on his face easing. I want to rebuild trust with you, with my friends, with myself. That night, as we prepared for bed, Daniel paused. Mom, he said softly, thank you. I know I blamed you before and I was wrong. You never stopped fighting for me, even when I pushed you away. I see that now. My eyes welled with tears, but I smiled. All I ever wanted was to protect you. Never forget that. We hugged, a long, quiet embrace, and for the first time in months, I felt a deep, settled peace. The storm had passed. The path forward was clear. The following week, Daniel and I set about reclaiming the life Vanessa had tried to manipulate. Each morning, he sat with Gerald to review accounts, credit reports, and legal strategies. His confidence grew with every completed task, every step that reasserted control over his finances and future. Rachel continued to support him, not just as an investigator, but as a steady presence who encouraged self-reflection and practical steps toward healing. Together, we created a system: daily check-ins, scheduled calls with Gerald, and careful monitoring of all banking activity. This structured approach was a small fortress, protecting him from further manipulation. One afternoon, while Rachel and Daniel reviewed credit statements, I watched them from the kitchen doorway. Daniel's brows were furrowed in concentration, but there was a subtle light in his eyes, a return of his natural resilience. Rachel pointed to a series of transfers, explaining how Vanessa had staggered payments across accounts to avoid immediate detection. Daniel listened carefully, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. I can't believe I didn't see it, he murmured. How could someone do this? Rachel placed a hand gently on his arm. It's not about your ability to see it. She was skilled at control, isolation, and deception. You were blinded by trust. That's not your fault. Evenings became family time again. We cooked together, shared stories from the past, and slowly rebuilt the rhythms of a household that had been fractured. Daniel's laughter began to return, tentative at first, then more natural. On one particularly warm evening, he carried a tray of tea out to the porch. The sky was painted with soft pinks and golds. I never realized how much I missed this, he admitted. Just being home, safe with people I trust? I smiled, feeling the heavy weight of fear lift. Safety is a luxury when it's earned, Daniel. You've earned it by standing up, asking questions, and refusing to be manipulated. Saturday arrived with the quiet hum of normalcy. Rachel had completed her report, neatly organized, and Daniel had read it multiple times. Each line, each note, reinforced his understanding. Vanessa's intentions had never been genuine. Her charm, her pleas, and her manipulations had been calculated. Daniel looked at me, a mixture of gratitude and determination in his gaze. I'm ready, he said, to move forward to face her legally and to truly let this chapter close. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. Then we do it together. You're not alone. That evening, we gathered all documentation to present to the authorities. Detective Chen reviewed it carefully, nodding as she confirmed the validity of our findings. This is strong. She won't have room to maneuver. We can proceed confidently. Daniel felt a swell of relief. For months, he had been weighed down by confusion, fear, and guilt. Now, clarity replaced that storm. The reality of what had been happening sank in, and with it, the resolve to reclaim his life fully. The next morning, the police were ready to act. Vanessa's arrest was swift. The news hit Daniel hard in the sense of finality. It was over, the threat neutralized. Seeing her in custody, stripped of pretense and control, brought an unspoken closure. Daniel exhaled slowly, a mixture of exhaustion and relief washing over him. It's finally over, he said, his voice steady but low. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Yes, and now begins the real work. Healing, rebuilding, and embracing the life you deserve. Over the next days, we focused on recovery. Daniel reconnected with old friends, mended relationships strained by isolation, and gradually began to regain trust, not just in others, but in himself. Rachel's continued presence provided reassurance, bridging the gap between fear and confidence. Each conversation, each plan, strengthened Daniel's sense of security. He was no longer a pawn in someone else's game. He was his own person again. By the end of the week, Daniel suggested a small celebratory dinner at home. It wasn't about extravagance, but about reclaiming joy. We set the table, lit candles, and shared stories that reminded us of life's simple pleasures. Laughter replaced tension, warmth replaced fear, and the sense of family. A sense of true connection deepened. That night, as Daniel went to bed, I watched him from the doorway. He was finally sleeping peacefully, unburdened by manipulation, fully in the present, ready for the future. Monday morning arrived with a crisp clarity that mirrored the shift in our lives. Daniel woke early, a quiet determination in his movements. Rachel was already reviewing schedules for follow up legal proceedings and suggested he join her for a morning coffee before diving into documentation. I watched them from the doorway, heart swelling with a mixture of pride and relief. For months, Daniel had been trapped in a web of deceit and manipulation, and now he was stepping into a space of autonomy, clarity, and self assurance. As they left for the downtown cafe, I stayed behind, tidying the kitchen and reflecting on the journey. Every phone call, every email, every sleepless night had led to this moment of reclamation. Vanessa's shadow was fading, replaced by the steady light of truth. It struck me how fragile trust could be, yet how resilient the human spirit. Daniel had been shaken to his core, yet he rose stronger, guided by patience, support, and the unwavering insistence of a mother who refused to be silenced. At the cafe, Daniel and Rachel sat with laptops and notebooks sprawled across the table. He scanned through transaction histories, cross referencing dates, amounts, and irregular patterns. It's exhausting to see it all laid bare, he said quietly. Rachel nodded. But necessary. Seeing it clearly means we control the narrative now, not her. You've been given the power to protect yourself and to reclaim what's yours. He inhaled slowly, absorbing the gravity of the situation. I've been blind, Rachel. I didn't see how much I was being used. I thought it was love. It wasn't love, Daniel. It was control masquerading as affection. And it's okay to acknowledge that. What matters is what you do next. He looked up, eyes glistening, a mixture of sadness and resolve. I want to do it right. I want this to be final. She offered a reassuring smile. And you will. One step at a time. Meanwhile, I prepared for the next phase at home, coordinating with Gerald, preparing additional documentation for the civil proceedings, and ensuring that every legal avenue was fortified. The work was meticulous, requiring patience, vigilance, and precision, but it was empowering. It was no longer just about protection, it was about justice and reclamation. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, watching my son grow more confident and self assured with every completed task. By mid afternoon, Daniel returned home, carrying a stack of carefully organized folders. He sat on the porch, eyes scanning the documents, confirming each detail. Everything is here. Everything we need to show the truth, he said, voice steady. I joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You've done all the hard work. You've faced deception, confusion, and betrayal. Now you get to stand in your own strength. He nodded, a quiet resolve settling over him, the remnants of fear replaced by certainty. Later that evening, we received a call from Detective Chen. Vanessa's case had advanced quickly. The police were preparing to formally charge her with multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. Daniel's posture stiffened, a mix of anticipation and relief etched across his features. "This is it, Mom, the final step," he said. I smiled gently, feeling the weight of months of tension finally start to lift. "It's justice, Daniel. You've earned it by staying true, documenting everything, and refusing to be silenced." As night fell, we shared a quiet dinner together. Rachel joined us, her presence calm and reassuring. Conversation drifted to lighter topics: books, gardening, even plans for small weekend trips. Laughter punctuated the evening, a stark contrast to the tension that had dominated recent months. For the first time in a long while, Daniel's eyes reflected hope, not fear. He looked at me, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I feel like I can finally breathe again," he admitted. "Like I'm no longer running, no longer trapped." After dinner, I lingered on the porch, watching the stars emerge. A sense of peace settled over me, bittersweet but powerful. Life had been tested, stretched to the limits of patience and endurance. Yet, through persistence, love, and unwavering vigilance, we had reclaimed what had been threatened. Daniel was no longer a victim, but a man restored, aware, empowered, and ready to embrace the future with clarity and courage. Tuesday morning, Daniel woke with purpose. The sun streamed through the blinds, casting golden lines across his bedroom floor. There was no hesitation in his movements, no lingering fear. Instead, there was clarity, a sense of regained control. He dressed quickly, a quiet determination marking each action, and left for Rachel's office to finalize the remaining paperwork for Vanessa's civil case. I watched him go, my chest tight with both pride and lingering worry. After months of manipulation, doubt, and betrayal, this was the first morning he truly owned his choices. While Daniel was gone, I focused on my own preparations. There were letters to write, evidence to organize, and phone calls to law enforcement to follow up. Each task felt like a stitch in the fabric of restoration, weaving the chaos of the past months into a framework of justice and clarity. My home, once a place of tension and sleepless nights, began to feel like a sanctuary again. I realized how much energy had been consumed by fear and uncertainty. And now, step by step, that energy was returning to me. By mid morning, Rachel called with an update. "Daniel has reviewed everything, and we're ready to proceed with formal filings. Detective Chen is supportive and has all necessary documentation. The prosecutor is on board. This case is airtight." I exhaled, a mixture of relief and anticipation swirling within me. "And Daniel?" I asked. "He's composed, focused. He's no longer afraid. The evidence has given him clarity and strength." I smiled, imagining him walking through the courthouse with dignity, no longer a pawn in Vanessa's manipulative game. When Daniel returned home, he carried himself differently. Gone was the haunted, uncertain look. In its place was a quiet confidence that radiated from his very posture. He placed the folders on the kitchen table and began reviewing them again. "Mom, I finally understand everything," he said, voice steady but layered with emotion. "I can see how she manipulated me, isolated me. I can see the red flags I ignored, but now I also see my own strength." I reached out, squeezing his hand. "You never lost your strength, Daniel. You were just in a storm that clouded your vision, and now the storm is passing." The phone rang, piercing the calm. It was an unknown number. My heart jumped. Instinctively, I didn't answer. Minutes later, another call, then a text. Each one a futile attempt by Vanessa to assert control. I showed them to Daniel. He shook his head, determination setting in. "She doesn't get to touch my life anymore. Not today, not ever again." He blocked the numbers, securing his boundaries. "I'm done being manipulated," he said firmly. "No more confusion, no more fear." Later that afternoon, we received word from Detective Chen. Vanessa had been served with formal charges: identity theft, wire fraud, and financial exploitation. Her bail was set high, and she was prohibited from contacting Daniel or me in any way. The weight of months of fear began to lift, replaced with a sense of justice. "This is the first real step toward closure," Daniel said, relief softening his voice. I nodded, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. The manipulator's influence had been neutralized, and my son could finally reclaim his life fully. That evening, we sat together in the garden, watching the roses bloom. Each flower seemed to symbolize resilience, endurance, and the quiet beauty that emerges after storms. Daniel spoke about his plans, focusing on work, rebuilding savings, and creating a life with Rachel based on honesty and love. He spoke with a confidence that was both inspiring and humbling. I listened, silently marveling at the transformation from a son ensnared in deceit to a man grounded in clarity and strength. Dinner was quiet but comforting. We laughed softly over small stories from the day, feeling the bonds of trust and connection rebuild with each shared word. For the first time in months, I felt like the mother I had always been, guiding, supporting, and witnessing my child flourish. Outside, the world seemed steady and predictable, a stark contrast to the chaos that had defined recent months. And yet, in the calm, I remained vigilant. Lessons learned had taught us to be cautious, patient, and prepared for any lingering attempts at disruption. As night fell, I reflected on the journey. The fear, the tears, the sleepless nights all had been necessary. They had forged resilience, patience, and clarity. Daniel was no longer a pawn, he was a partner in reclaiming the truth. Vanessa's manipulations, once all consuming, were now distant echoes, impotent in the face of documentation, clarity, and unwavering love. I realized that sometimes the hardest battles yield the most profound victories. Wednesday morning, the air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine from the nearby park. Daniel woke early, not out of obligation, but purpose. He moved through the house with a calm determination I hadn't seen in months. Breakfast was quiet, but the silence wasn't heavy, it was a companionable peace. For the first time since Vanessa's manipulation had begun, Daniel and I were not under the shadow of fear, but basking in clarity. He spoke of the steps ahead with confidence: court proceedings, asset recovery, and the small, deliberate task of rebuilding trust with himself. By mid morning, Rachel joined us, carrying her signature warm smile and a stack of carefully organized documents. She had spent hours coordinating with the detective and civil attorney to ensure every detail was accounted for. Mom, Daniel, she said, everything is ready. The filings are accurate, the report's thorough. Vanessa doesn't stand a chance. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, tempered by the memory of months of deception. I had hoped for justice, but now I could see it crystallizing into reality. Daniel nodded, a firm resolve in his eyes. This is it, he said. We finally reclaim our lives. The phone rang, an unfamiliar number flashing urgently across the screen. I glanced at Daniel, who shook his head. Not this time, he said, blocking it before the caller could leave a message. Each attempt by Vanessa to reach us, each desperate maneuver, only strengthened our resolve. The manipulator's control was crumbling, her influence over Daniel finally severed. I realized then that this was not just about stopping her. It was about reclaiming our peace, our dignity, our ability to move forward without fear. By noon, the civil filings were submitted. Gerald called to confirm receipt, and Detective Chen updated us on the criminal investigation. Every step felt like a stitch, repairing the tear Vanessa had caused in our lives. Daniel's relief was tangible, yet there was a shadow of lingering disbelief. Months of gaslighting, manipulation, and financial exploitation left subtle marks. Mom, he said quietly, I still can't believe I almost lost myself. I trusted her, and she betrayed me completely. I held his hand, feeling the strength in his grip, and whispered, You didn't lose yourself, you found clarity. And you found strength you didn't know was there. Later that afternoon, we went for a walk through the neighborhood. The streets felt different, lighter, open, free of the oppressive tension that had lingered for months. Daniel moved with purpose, his posture straight, his eyes alert but relaxed. Rachel walked beside him, her laughter spilling into the air, blending with the distant hum of city life. I watched them, heart full, understanding in a way I hadn't before. Healing is not instantaneous. It is deliberate, patient, and requires the courage to face what was hidden and to step forward anyway. Back home, we spent the evening reviewing financial documents one last time. Each line, each transaction, painted the clear picture of Vanessa's exploitation. Daniel's shock had given way to anger, and then to understanding, a transformation born not just from discovery, but from empowerment. He began drafting plans for secure accounts, financial safeguards, and personal boundaries. I'm taking control, he said firmly. No one manipulates me again. I felt a swell of pride, but also a quiet sorrow for the months lost, the innocence exploited. That night, as we prepared for bed, Daniel lingered in the living room, staring out the window at the city lights. Mom, he said softly, thank you for not giving up on me, for seeing what I couldn't, for fighting when I couldn't see the battle myself. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I held them back. That's what love does, I replied. Sometimes love is standing firm when the world tells you to back down. Sometimes love is refusing to let fear define your choices. He nodded, and for the first time, I felt a sense of closure, not because the fight was over, but because the next chapter could begin without the chains of manipulation and deceit. In the following days, Vanessa's attempts grew increasingly frantic. Emails, texts, even legal threats arrived in rapid succession. But each was met with meticulous documentation, calm responses from our legal team, and a renewed sense of empowerment for Daniel. The manipulator's control had been neutralized, her influence dismantled by truth, evidence, and unwavering love. For Daniel, it was a rebirth, a chance to step into life on his own terms, with clarity, confidence, and healthy boundaries firmly in place. The morning sunlight spilled over the garden, casting long shadows across the dewy grass. It was the kind of day that felt full of possibility, not weighed down by the remnants of fear or manipulation. Daniel was up early, moving with quiet purpose, arranging flowers, preparing the backyard for a small gathering. Today wasn't about grand gestures or extravagant ceremonies. It was about healing, closure, and celebrating life reclaimed. Rachel joined him, carrying a basket of carefully chosen herbs and a few delicate blooms. I watched from the kitchen window, heart swelling with pride and relief. By mid-morning, the first guests began to arrive, close friends and family who had witnessed the chaos of the past months and stood steadfast in support. Laughter replaced the tension that had once defined our lives, the air alive with warmth and familiarity. Daniel moved among the guests with ease, his calm confidence evident to anyone who observed him. He had been through storms that could have broken anyone, yet here he was, stronger, wiser, and more grounded than ever. Rachel's presence beside him radiated warmth and balance. I realized then that this peace, this love, was the true victory, far beyond any courtroom or bank account. The ceremony was intimate. Under Robert's oak tree, with sunlight filtering through the leaves, Daniel and Rachel exchanged vows that spoke of love, trust, and resilience. When Daniel said, "I promise to always listen to the people who love me, to never mistake control for care," I felt a wave of emotion so intense I could hardly breathe. These words weren't just vows to Rachel. They were a declaration of triumph over manipulation, a promise to himself and to the life he deserved. Tears blurred my vision, but they were tears of relief, joy, and absolute certainty that the worst was behind us. After the ceremony, we shared a simple meal in the backyard, the air filled with laughter, conversation, and the scent of blooming flowers. I watched Daniel play with the neighbors' children, guiding them in games with patience and care. Rachel's soft laughter mingled with his, a melody of happiness I had thought lost to us forever. In that moment, I understood that real love isn't flashy or dramatic. It's steady, nurturing, and resilient. It's about choosing respect, honesty, and mutual support over convenience, manipulation, or deceit. Holding baby Margaret Rose later that afternoon, I felt the weight of the past months lift completely. Daniel knelt beside me, his hand gently brushing Margaret's hair. "I want her to know her grandmother," he whispered. "You taught me what unconditional love looks like." I smiled through tears, cradling the tiny, trusting life in my arms. The symbolism was not lost on me. From chaos and manipulation, a new life, pure and untainted, had emerged. The past no longer dictated our future. In the weeks that followed, Vanessa's attempts to interfere ceased. Her arrest and subsequent imprisonment ensured that Daniel, Rachel, and Margaret could live without fear. The legal proceedings concluded with clear justice: restitution, imprisonment, and permanent restraining orders. Vanessa's world, once meticulously curated through manipulation and deceit, lay in ruins. Meanwhile, we flourished, our lives expanding into something rich, fulfilling, and profoundly meaningful. Daniel continued to rebuild, taking steps to ensure financial security and emotional well-being. Rachel became his partner in every sense: supportive, independent, and deeply loving. I immersed myself in volunteer work, helping survivors of financial and emotional abuse, channeling my energy into transforming pain into empowerment. Our family bonds deepened, strengthened by the trials we had faced together. Sunday dinners became sacred, filled with stories, laughter, and connection. Margaret Rose grew surrounded by love, learning from the example of resilience, honesty, and unwavering care set by her parents and grandmother. As I sat in the garden one evening, watching Daniel push Margaret in her stroller while Rachel laughed at something he said, I felt complete peace. The fight, the fear, the manipulation, all of it had led to this clarity, this fullness of life. We had won not through vengeance, but through truth, perseverance, and love. Justice had been served, life had been reclaimed, and the bonds of family had been strengthened beyond measure. Looking back now, I understand the lesson. The hardest battles we fight are often for the people we love most. Real love isn't convenient. It's standing firm when someone you love is being destroyed, even if they push you away. Trust instincts, document the truth, and never underestimate the power of a determined heart. For Daniel, Rachel, Margaret, and me, life had begun anew, unshackled, joyful, and free. And that, ultimately, was the victory we had fought for together forever.